Black CEO walks into his own coffee shop, stunned after hearing 3 words. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. This place isn't for you. Order quick or leave. The hiss of the espresso machine cut through the morning air, sharp and metallic. Then came the words low, dismissive, but loud enough to slice the quiet of the shop. The barista didn't whisper. She said it like a rule, like policy carved into stone. Heads turned. A man at the counter chuckled under his breath, leaning sideways as if to make sure everyone heard him. Across the room, near the window, a man in a gray hoodie lifted his cup, his face calm, unreadable, a simple sip of coffee. He looked like any other customer, jeans slightly frayed at the knees, a knit cap pulled low, sneakers clean but ordinary. Nothing about him shouted power, nothing except the stillness in his posture. But in that stillness, the insult landed like a gavel. Silence spread. Chairs creaked. Someone in the back tapped a phone, recording. The smell of roasted beans lingered, but the air no longer felt warm. It was tight, tense, like glass ready to crack. At the counter, another voice chimed in, a man waiting for his latte, grinning at the hoodie in the corner. He looks broke. Bet he can't even pay for a latte. The barista smirked, arms crossed. The words weren't just about coffee. They were about worth, about who belongs. And in that moment, the entire cafe seemed to decide. He didn't. But he didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He didn't even look away from the steam curling above his cup. Because sometimes power isn't in shouting, it's in waiting. The room buzzed with a fragile unease. A teenager near the door shifted in his chair, angling his phone discreetly, camera light blinking. A woman with a laptop paused mid-typing, fingers hovering in disbelief. People whispered not about the menu, not about their orders, but about the man in the hoodie. And still, he Saturday anchored. The insult echoed in the tiled walls. Not for you. Not your kind. You don't belong. But if you looked closer at the way he exhaled, at the steady grip on his cup, you'd sense something else. Something none of them saw coming. Because the man in the hoodie wasn't a stranger. He wasn't a drifter. He was the reason this shop existed. He was the owner, the millionaire, the black CEO whose name was etched in the lease above their heads. And in less than 10 minutes, every voice that had dismissed him would choke on regret. But right now, in this suspended moment, the cafe was still blind. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to him. He set his cup down softly, and the silence in the cafe grew heavier. The cafe looked ordinary. Warm lights, chalkboard menus, the steady hiss of steamed milk. But beneath that hum of normalcy, the room carried something sharper, like the quiet before a storm. He sat alone, a man in a hoodie and torn jeans, the kind of outfit that made people underestimate. Intentional, deliberate, because that morning wasn't about coffee. It was a test. His name was Marcus Hale, but no one here called him that. To them, he was just another customer, quiet, unshaven, anonymous. Not the founder, not the man who had signed every lease, financed every espresso machine, trained the very staff now dismissing him. No one knew. And that was the point. He remembered mornings 20 years earlier scrubbing counters at a chain cafe in Atlanta, invisible behind the bar. He remembered how customers spoke to him then, clipped and cold, as if he were furniture. He swore he would build something different. And he had. A brand, a network, Hale Brews. Now he was back in one of his own shops, and the words he just heard, "This place isn't for you," felt like déjà vu sharpened into glass. A woman by the window whispered, "Why are they treating him like that?" Her friend shrugged, uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact. The man at the counter leaned on the register, smirk widening. "Not his kind of place, trust me. Trust me." 2 words that carried arrogance, but no truth. The barista turned slightly, voice pitched lower but still cutting. "People like that, they linger, they never tip." He heard every word. He always did. But he didn't speak. Not yet. Instead, He adjusted his cup on the wooden table, aligning it with the seam in the grain. Control, precision, a ritual of calm when others tried to strip it away. Someone near the entrance lifted a phone. The faint red light blinked. Recording had begun. A silent witness. The tension wasn't loud, it was visible, in the stiff shoulders of the barista, in the way a laptop's keys stopped mid-press, in the shallow breaths of customers waiting to see whether the man in the hoodie would stand or stay seated. He chose stillness, again, because silence wasn't weakness, it was weight. A memory flickered. He was 19, rejected from a cafe job interview because you don't look like management material. At 27, denied a business loan despite collateral. At 34, laughed at in a bank lobby when he tried to buy his first property. Every insult carved into him like notches on steel. And now, 42, he sat in a cafe that bore his name on the sign above the door, Hail Brews, and strangers dared to measure his worth with a latte. The irony stung, but he didn't blink. Because if power is real, it doesn't need to announce itself early. The barista tapped her register loudly, breaking the silence. "Next customer," she said sharply, eyes darting toward him again. "Let's keep the line moving." The man in the hoodie didn't move. He simply sipped, steady, letting the pause stretch long enough to make everyone in the cafe feel it. And somewhere between that sip and that silence, the ground began to shift. The line at the counter grew restless. Shoes tapped, sighs echoed, but the real noise was sharper words. The man waiting for his latte leaned closer to the barista, his voice pitched high enough for the room to catch. "Come on, look at him. Hoodie, ripped jeans, sitting like he owns the place. Probably can't afford drip coffee." A ripple of laughter broke out from two customers near the pastry case. Nervous, not joyful. The kind of laugh people use to hide discomfort. But it was enough. Enough to draw eyes toward the man in the corner. He lifted his gaze. Not long, just a second. Calm. Controlled. Then he lowered it back to his cup. The barista smirked, emboldened. She leaned across the counter and whispered, but made sure the whisper traveled. "He looks like trouble. People like that hang around until security asks them to leave." The customer at the counter chuckled, shaking his head. "Bet he's just here to use the Wi-Fi. Can't pay for more than one drink." The air thickened. A woman near the window frowned, fingers still poised above her keyboard. A teenager near the door lifted his phone higher, capturing the exchange. The red recording light glowed like an alarm. The man in the hoodie, Marcus Hale, shifted slightly in his seat, elbows resting on the table. His face betrayed nothing, but behind his calm eyes was fire. Another customer, a middle-aged man in a suit, spoke without looking up from his phone. "These cafes get ruined when they let anyone sit around. Standards matter." The word standards fell like a blade. Cold, final. Marcus set his cup down gently, the ceramic clink echoing louder than it should have. For a heartbeat, the room held still. A barista's coworker joined in now, laughing nervously. "One drink, 3 hours. That's the type." It was no longer subtle, it was public. Every sentence aimed like a dart, and every dart landed. The young man recording at the door muttered under his breath, words caught on his camera mic. "This doesn't feel right." And it didn't. The cafe no longer hummed with routine comfort. It buzzed with bias, with tension, with the slow, rising heat of humiliation dressed as customer service. Marcus inhaled, steady. He'd lived this scene before, in banks, hotels, boardrooms, always the same choreography. The smirk, the whisper, the escalation. He'd learned long ago that silence could be armor. But armor wasn't the same as inaction. He tapped his phone under the table, screen lighting briefly. One message sent. Just 3 words. "Stand by. Recording." On the other end, miles away, his assistant would know exactly what that meant. Protocol in motion. Back at the counter, the first customer finally collected his latte. Before walking away, he turned, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Better enjoy that corner seat while it lasts, man. They'll kick you out soon enough." Whispers spread, quick and sharp. Some customers shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned in, waiting for the scene to unfold. And still, Marcus didn't move. Because storms are louder just before they break. The cafe had gone strange, half quiet, half buzzing. Laughter sat uneasily on top of the tension, like foam over bitter coffee. Every eye knew where to land. The man in the hoodie, alone at his table, steady hands on a chipped ceramic cup. Marcus Hale did not rise, did not speak. He breathed slow, deliberate, as if even oxygen should not be wasted on words meant to diminish him. Silence was his first language, and he wielded it now. The barista, frustrated that her comment hadn't provoked a reaction, clicked the register keys louder. Metal snapped against plastic, sharp and petty. Her coworker leaned in, smirk curling like steam from a crooked spout. "See? He won't even defend himself. Knows he doesn't belong." Customers shifted. Some nodded unconsciously, buying into the story that silence meant guilt. Others looked away, ashamed of the theater unfolding. At the back corner, the teenager recording whispered into his phone mic, "He hasn't said a word. They're just going at him." Marcus adjusted his cup again, aligning it with the wood grain, like a ritual. His thoughts, however, weren't idle. He remembered being 19, standing in a crowded Atlanta lobby when a security guard told him, "Move along, kid. This isn't for you." He remembered the sting, the disbelief, the way he left without a word because back then he had nothing but silence. Now, decades later, he had an empire, but he still carried the silence. And today, he chose to use it, because silence could be a mirror. It forced others to see themselves, hear themselves, without interruption. The man in the suit at the counter sneered again, half to the barista, half to the room. You can always tell. One look and you know who's not a real customer. Marcus blinked once, slowly, calm, centered. A woman with a laptop finally broke her own silence. She muttered, almost too low to hear, "That's not right." The barista whipped her head toward the voice, but the woman had already dropped her eyes back to the keyboard, fingers frozen in hesitation, fear and conscience wrestling in her chest. The red light on the teenager's phone blinked steadily, capturing every insult, every pause, every cruel word. Marcus inhaled, long and measured. To anyone watching, it looked like nothing. To him, it was everything. The inhale steadied his patience, and the patience was the trap. Because the louder they spoke, the deeper they dug, and when the reveal came, every recorded word would testify against them. Silence was not absence. It was strategy. He sipped his coffee, unhurried, letting the bitter roast settle on his tongue. The sound of the sip, quiet but deliberate, cut the cafe in half. Some customers flinched at the audacity. How dare he remain so calm? Others leaned forward, sensing the storm building behind that calm. The barista crossed her arms, rolling her eyes, muttering one more jab under her breath. $3 order, 3-hour stay. That's his type. Marcus set the cup down, perfectly centered again. Still not a word. And yet the silence had become the loudest thing in the room. The red recording light blinked like a pulse in the corner of the cafe. The teenager by the door shifted his phone higher, no longer pretending. His whisper broke into the open air. "I'm filming this. People need to see." That sentence cracked the room. Heads turned. The barista froze, mid-motion with the milk pitcher. Her smirk faltered. She hadn't expected the insults to echo beyond these four walls, but they had. The woman with the laptop finally lifted her eyes. Her voice carried across the hum of the espresso machine. "You can't just say things like that. He ordered, he paid, leave him alone." It wasn't loud, it wasn't defiant, but it was enough. Enough for the rest of the cafe to realize that silence no longer belonged only to Marcus. The man in the suit scoffed, unwilling to let go. "Don't get soft. This isn't charity seating." But his tone wavered. The authority he thought he carried began to thin. Near the pastry case, a young mother shifted her toddler onto her hip, shaking her head. She whispered to the stranger beside her, "He's just drinking coffee. Why are they making it a scene?" Whispers spread like sparks in dry air. Some customers fidgeted, some filmed, some chose to look away. But the air was no longer one-sided. The tide was shifting. The teenager at the door raised his voice now, steadying his phone with both hands. "It's all on record. Every word you said." Ugh. The barista slammed the milk pitcher down, steam bursting like anger into the air. "Stop recording. You can't film in here." But her voice betrayed her. It cracked, thin, no longer dripping with confidence. Marcus Hale remained silent, fingers steady on his cup, but in the silence, he felt the shift. Witnesses had entered the story, and once witnesses spoke, truth became heavier than insult. The woman with the laptop closed her screen and stood, eyes trained on the counter. "You don't get to decide who belongs, not here, not anywhere." Her words, caught on multiple phones now, rang louder than the clatter of cups. For the first time, the man in the hoodie, Marcus, looked directly at her. Not a nod, not a smile, just acknowledgement. a quiet signal that he'd heard her, that her courage had weight. The suit at the counter tried one last jab. Look at him, sitting there like he's above it all. If he had money, he'd prove it. Ugh. The teenager panned his camera back to Marcus. The CEO didn't move, didn't blink. His stillness said more than defense ever could, and the cafe knew it, because when one voice dares to speak, others follow. And when silence is chosen, not forced, it becomes power. In that moment, Marcus Hale didn't stand alone. He had witnesses, and their presence was about to change everything. The hiss of steam died down, replaced by the heavier sound of footsteps. From the back hallway, a man in a pressed shirt and apron stepped forward. He wasn't rushed. He wasn't flustered. He moved like someone used to being obeyed. The cafe manager. His eyes scanned the room, catching the phones raised, the silence coiled tight. He landed his gaze on Marcus, sitting calm in the corner, and dismissed him in an instant. What's going on here? His tone wasn't curious. It was accusatory. The barista answered quickly, eager, relief in her voice now that authority had arrived. He's been sitting here too long, making trouble. Customers are uncomfortable. The manager's eyes narrowed. Uncomfortable? Or unpaid? He marched closer to Marcus's table, voice rising for the room. Sir, we can't have people loitering. One drink doesn't buy you a corner office. This is a business, not a shelter. A few gasps flickered through the cafe. The teenager's camera shook as he whispered. He really said that. Marcus didn't move. Not a muscle. The woman with the laptop, now standing, spoke louder this time. He paid for his drink. You're harassing him. The manager turned on her with a sharp smile. And who are you? Another customer? Mind your latte, not our policy. The arrogance landed heavy, souring the air. But before the silence could return, the suited man at the counter added fuel. She's wasting her breath. Look at him. He doesn't belong here. The phrase hung heavy. Doesn't belong. Marcus adjusted his cup again, the scrape of ceramic against wood louder than words. He breathed once, steady, and let the noise of the room unravel itself. The manager leaned closer, crowding his space. Sir, I'm giving you a choice. Either buy more or leave. We don't tolerate freeloaders. Phones caught every syllable. The teenager's lens zoomed, capturing the veins in the manager's temple, the stiffness in Marcus's jaw. The young mother shifted her child on her hip, eyes wide. He's not freeloading, he's a customer. But the manager didn't acknowledge her. He planted his hand on the table, looming over Marcus. This is the last time I'll ask politely. The silence thickened. It wasn't calm anymore, it was pressure, dense and suffocating. The kind that makes every bystander feel complicit. Marcus sat anchored, his eyes finally lifting to meet the manager's. No words yet, just a gaze, still, heavy, unflinching. And in that silence, everyone else in the cafe realized something the staff didn't. The storm wasn't avoiding them, it was waiting. The manager's hand pressed flat against the table, fingers splayed near Marcus's cup, as if claiming the space itself. His voice sharpened, each syllable meant to slice. You've outstayed your welcome. Finish that coffee and get out, or I'll call security to remove you. The words hung like smoke in the cafe. Some customers froze mid-breath. Others stared at their phones, red lights blinking. The sound of foam frothing in the milk pitcher stopped. Even the machines seemed to listen. Marcus didn't move. The manager's lip curled, confidence swelling. Do you hear me? This cafe isn't a public bench. It's for real customers. You don't belong here. The phrase cracked like a whip. You don't belong here. The teenager by the door muttered into his phone. He said it, out loud, everyone heard. The woman with the laptop took a step forward. He paid. He has every right to sit here. The manager turned sharply. Ma'am, if you want to defend a vagrant, that's on you, but don't disrupt my cafe. Gasps rippled. A mother clutched her child tighter, murmuring under her breath. The suited man by the counter smirked, feeding off the power imbalance. Told you, he's nothing. Look at him silent, like he knows we're right. The barista, emboldened again, chimed in. Call security. Let them drag him out. That'll end it. The manager nodded. He pulled a phone from his apron pocket, dialing fast. His words were crisp, rehearsed, like he'd said them before. Yes, I have an individual refusing to leave. Possible loiterer. Send someone over. Every phone in the room caught it. The accusation, the false narrative, the escalation that crossed the line. Marcus set his cup down with precision. The soft click of ceramic against wood sliced through the silence. He lifted his gaze, steady, eyes fixed on the manager. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move his body forward. He simply held that stare. And somehow, it carried more weight than shouting ever could. The teenager whispered again, voice shaking now. "They're calling security for drinking coffee." The woman with the laptop shook her head, her voice trembling with anger. "This is harassment, pure and simple." The manager ended his call, sliding the phone back into his pocket. He straightened his apron, exhaling smug satisfaction. "Security's on the way. Your little stay is over." The barista smirked, arms folded. "Good. Let's clear the space for real customers." The suited man raised his cup like a toast. Finally. But beneath their confidence was something else, thin cracks forming. The whispers around the cafe were louder now, phones angled higher, witnesses muttering, "This isn't right. He didn't do anything. They're crossing the line." And at the center of it all, Marcus Hale sat motionless. But his silence no longer felt passive. It felt loaded, like a storm gathering behind glass. Security was coming. The insults had reached their peak, and the man they thought powerless was seconds away from turning silence into fire. The cafe door rattled as someone outside tested the handle. Security wasn't here yet, but the call had been made. The tension thickened, pressing down like humidity before rain. Marcus Hale lifted his phone. No rush, no drama, just a calm, deliberate motion. He tapped once, twice, and brought it to his ear. The room noticed. Phones angled closer, whispers hushed. Even the barista, arms crossed smugly, tilted her head to listen. His voice was low, controlled, the kind of tone that carried authority without raising volume. "It's happening. Document everything. Timestamp now." On the other end, miles away, a voice answered immediately. "Clear. Efficient. Understood. Logging begins. Do you want the system engaged?" Marcus's eyes didn't leave the manager looming over him. "Yes. Protocol 1. Record. Notify legal. Stand by." Click. He set the phone down on the table, calmly, quietly. The barista laughed under her breath. "Calling your mom won't save you." The words barely left her mouth before the teenager's camera caught them. The room flinched. The cruelty was naked now. Marcus folded his hands around his cup, steady as stone. He didn't rise. He didn't need to, because his silence had shifted no longer defensive, but commanding. The manager tried to reclaim control. He straightened, voice louder. "I've already called security. You can make all the phone calls you want. It won't change anything." But his bravado cracked. His eyes flicked toward the phones raised across the room. Dozens of tiny lenses, all recording. A mother with a stroller whispered to another guest. "Did you hear what he said? Protocol? What does that mean?" The suited man near the counter scoffed. "It means nothing. Just bluffing." But it didn't sound convincing. Marcus leaned back in his chair, finally breaking the long stillness. His voice, though quiet, carried across the cafe like a gavel striking wood. "Every word you've spoken has been logged. Every insult, every threat, every false report." The manager blinked, confusion flashing across his face. "What are you talking about?" Marcus' gaze didn't falter. "You'll understand soon enough." The teenager muttered into his phone, awe in his tone. He's not scared, he's ready. The cafe was no longer sure where power Saturday. The staff had raised their voices, but their certainty was thinning. Customers whispered louder. Some stood. Some positioned themselves closer, as if instinct told them something larger was about to break. And in the center of it all, Marcus Hale remained composed. The storm had been building for 20 minutes. The insults, the smirks, the threats, they thought he absorbed them in silence. But the truth was simpler and far more dangerous. He had been waiting. Now the first move was made. Protocol engaged. Evidence secure. Witnesses present. The staff thought security was coming for Marcus. They didn't realize security would be coming for them. The cafe door opened, and for a moment everyone thought security had arrived. But it was just another customer startled by the tense air, slowing as he stepped inside. All eyes swung back to the corner table. To Marcus. The manager hovered over him, still puffed with authority, though the edges of his confidence were cracking. "You can make your little calls, but when security comes, you're out." "Hi." Marcus lifted his cup one final time, took a measured sip, and set it down with a click that cut through the silence. His gaze met the manager's. Calm, direct, unshakable. Then he spoke. "Do you know whose cafe this is?" The manager scoffed, rolling his eyes. "Yes, Hale Brews. Our founder's some rich guy who doesn't live anywhere near here." Marcus's lips curved, not a smile, but something sharper. "You're looking at him." The words landed like thunder. The cafe erupted in gasps, a few outright shouts. Phones tilted higher. The teenager at the door nearly dropped his device, catching himself just in time. The woman with the laptop covered her mouth. "Oh my God." The mother with the stroller whispered to her child, but her eyes never left Marcus. The barista's smirk vanished, her jaw tightening as the weight of what he said pressed down. The manager blinked rapidly, shaking his head as if trying to erase the moment. "You're lying. If you owned this place, you wouldn't sit there dressed like that." Marcus leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice low but carrying to every corner. "You mistook silence for weakness and clothes for worth. That's your mistake. The deed to this building bears my name. Every paycheck here flows from my company. Every bean you grind, every cup you pour, is mine." The teenager's voice trembled into his mic. "He said it. He's the owner, the CEO." Phones captured every angle. Customers murmured, their whispers shifting from pity to awe. The manager's confidence unraveled. His hand twitched toward the phone in his apron pocket, as if grasping for control he no longer had. "No, this can't." Marcus stood. For the first time since the insults began, he rose from his seat. Not hurried, not aggressive, just deliberate, steady, towering over the table he'd sat at. "You wanted me gone. You called me a loiterer. You summoned security. But what you didn't know," he paused, letting the silence grip the room, "is that you work for me." The cafe fell utterly still. The barista's hands trembled against the counter. The manager's face paled, his authority dissolving into panic. The suited man at the counter finally lowered his cup, eyes darting around, unsure where to land. And the customers, the silent witnesses, broke into whispers that carried both shock and satisfaction. The storm had broken, and for the first time, everyone in the cafe understood who truly belonged. The weight of Marcus's words slammed into the cafe harder than any door could. The room fractured. Gasps, whispers, phones shaking in stunned hands. The energy flipped in a heartbeat from mockery to shock, from arrogance to fear. The barista froze, her smirk carved off her face. Her arms, once crossed in smug defiance, now hung awkwardly at her sides. She looked at Marcus, then at the manager, desperate for him to refute what had just been revealed. The manager's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. No words came. His authority built on tone, posture, uniform, crumbled like paper in water. The suited man at the counter blinked, setting his cup down too hard. Coffee splashed over the rim unnoticed. He scanned the cafe, searching for someone to laugh, to agree, to keep the illusion alive. But no one did. The silence was suffocating. The teenager at the door whispered into his camera, his voice trembling with excitement. "You're watching this live. The guy they tried to throw out, he's the owner, the CEO. It's his cafe." Comments began flooding his live stream. "No way. Get his face. Justice right there." The red light glowed brighter in reflection, as if the lens itself had chosen sides. The woman with the laptop pressed her palm to her chest, exhaling relief, as though the truth had freed more than just Marcus. It freed her from complicity. "I knew it. I knew something was wrong." The young mother bounced her toddler gently, murmuring, "That's what happens when you judge someone by clothes." Every customer had shifted. Chairs turned. Bodies angled toward Marcus, not the counter. The weight of loyalty in the room moved with them. The manager stumbled back half a step, hands twitching at his apron. "You can't just say that. Anyone can claim." Marcus's eyes locked onto him, steady, heavy, unblinking. "Try me." And then, from his phone on the table, a voice chimed through the speaker. Crisp, professional. "Mr. Hale, this is legal. Protocol 1 is active. Every statement made against you has been logged. Do you wish to authorize escalation?" The room gasped. The barista's face drained of color. The manager's jaw slackened, his protests evaporating before they formed. The customers knew now. This wasn't a bluff. This was structure. This was power. One older man near the window muttered with a shake of his head. "All that arrogance, all that talk, to the man who signs their checks." Phones rose higher. Cameras zoomed closer. Applause hadn't started yet, but the atmosphere carried the edge of it. The crowd was restless, teetering between disbelief and vindication. And in the center of that storm, Marcus Hale stood unmoved. The storm that once threatened him had turned inward, crashing down on those who had mocked him. The cafe wasn't laughing anymore. It was watching, recording, remembering. And for the staff, every second of silence became a verdict. The silence in the cafe was so heavy it felt physical, pressing against skin and bone. Every eye was on Marcus. Every phone was lifted, recording. The staff, once loud and confident, now looked small in the glow of so many lenses. Marcus didn't shout. He didn't need to. His words cut clean without volume. Effective immediately, your employment is terminated. The barista's head jerked up, disbelief etched across her face. You can't. Marcus's eyes pinned her in place. Calm. Final. I can, and I just did. The manager stammered, hands fidgeting at his apron. You don't understand. We were following protocol. Marcus stepped closer, the weight of his presence collapsing the lie. Protocol doesn't permit harassment. Protocol doesn't permit discrimination. You called security on your own employer. You humiliated a paying customer who owns this building, this business, this brand. That's not protocol, that's arrogance. The teenager's voice carried on live stream. Oh my God, he's firing them. Right here. Huh. The cafe erupted in whispers, some gasps, some outright applause from the back. The young mother clapped once, softly, then again louder. Others joined, tentative but rising. Marcus didn't break focus. His tone stayed steady. Manager, hand over your keys, now. The man hesitated, sweat beading at his temple. He glanced around for support, but found only phones aimed at him and faces filled with disdain. His hand shook as he fumbled in his pocket, pulling out a ring of keys. He placed them on the counter with a clatter that sounded like defeat. Marcus nodded once. Access revoked. You will not return here. He turned to the barista, whose face was pale now, lips pressed tight. You thought disrespect was service. It isn't. Your shift is over permanently. Her shoulders sagged as the truth sank in. Phones captured everything. Witnesses recorded the shift in power. The ones who mocked him minutes earlier now shrank under his gaze, stripped of authority. Marcus lifted his phone from the table, tapped once, and a voice answered instantly. This is Hale Operations. Lock their access, Marcus said, eyes never leaving the staff. Deactivate credentials. Note today's incident for legal record. Effective immediately. Confirmed. The cafe screens flickered as the staff login system went dark. Their names vanished from the roster in real time. The finality was brutal, clean, irreversible. The room exhaled as if justice itself had swept through the air vents. A man near the window muttered, half in awe, half in fear. He didn't just fire them, he erased them. And in that moment, Marcus wasn't just a man in a hoodie with a coffee cup. He was the architect of the room itself, delivering judgment with quiet precision. The same staff who had laughed minutes ago now stood stripped of everything, jobs, dignity, control. And the customers who had watched in silence felt the shift like a current under their feet. Justice had arrived. Not loud, not vengeful, just final. The cafe no longer buzzed with arrogance. It hummed with something else, shame, awe, vindication. The staff stood frozen, their uniforms suddenly costumes that no longer meant anything. Keys surrendered, access revoked. Their power gone in the time it took to brew a single cup of coffee. Marcus Hale remained standing, calm as stone. Phones captured every angle, the hoodie, the steady hands, the gaze that never once faltered. The teenager by the door whispered to his live stream, voice breaking with adrenaline. This is history. He fired them, in his own cafe. They tried to humiliate him, and he just erased them. The woman with the laptop exhaled relief, her voice rising just enough. That's what dignity looks like. The young mother shifted her toddler, whispering to the child, though the words were meant for the room. Remember this, power doesn't shout, it speaks steady. Applause began soft, uncertain, but it grew. Hands clapped from the back, then the sides, until the entire cafe pulsed with it. Customers who minutes ago sat silent now stood, bearing witness not just to the insult, but to the justice that followed. The manager tried one last desperate plea, voice cracking. You can't just ruin people's lives in front of an audience. Marcus turned, gaze heavy, voice low but sharp enough to cut through the applause. You ruined your own life the moment you decided respect was optional. The cafe went quiet again, hanging on his every word. He stepped toward the counter, picking up the abandoned ring of keys, weighing them in his hand. Then, without ceremony, he dropped them into the trash. The clatter was final. Marcus lifted his cup from the table, the last sip cold but deliberate. He faced the room. His words meant not just for the staff, not just for the witnesses, but for anyone who had ever been told you don't belong. Respect isn't about uniforms, paychecks, or titles. It's about how you treat the person in front of you. Remember this: silence is not submission, and dignity is not optional. Phones caught the sentence like scripture. He set the cup down one final time, then walked toward the door. Customers parted to let him pass, some reaching out to pat his shoulder, others whispering thanks. The teenager filmed every step, his live stream comments flooding with fire emojis, claps, words like legend and justice. Marcus didn't bask in it. He didn't need to. Justice wasn't about applause. It was about correction. As he reached the door, he paused, one hand on the handle. Without turning, his final words carried across the room. Quiet but absolute. I don't need to film proof. I am the proof. And with that, he left. The cafe exhaled, the weight of truth settling in the walls themselves. The staff who mocked him were gone. The witnesses who doubted were awakened. And those who stayed knew they had seen something more than coffee and conflict. They had seen dignity win.